Hey, welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with me, Rob Kosberg. Every week, I interview thought leaders and experts who have used a book to grow their income and their impact. So tune in weekly for these interviews so you can learn how to use your own best-selling book and go from hunting for clients and opportunities to instead being the hunted. Hey, welcome everybody. Rob here with another Publish, Promote, Profit podcast episode. Really excited to bring a great guest to you, a man that completely understands how to build a platform, grow your authority. Poirier is a multiple-time TEDx speaker, host of the top-rated Let's Do Influencing radio show, founder of Blue Talks brand, which we're going to talk a good bit about, I think, today, or hopefully. You've been featured in multiple television specials. You're, of course, a best-selling author, including the Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller Quitless, and the book of public speaking. We'll talk a little bit about that. You've done tons of things, columnist with Entrepreneur and Forbes. You've interviewed 6,500 of the world's top leaders. You've spoken on site at Harvard, and now you're on the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast. So holy cow, what is there left to do? Corey, good to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Rob. I'm super stoked to be here. And I like to think that I'm just getting started. So thank you.
Well, you are a prolific individual. So getting started, holy cow, I don't know what's left, but I know one of your passions is helping people to create their brand, influence, et cetera. Maybe take a couple of minutes, describe what you're doing, what you're focused on, what Blue Talks are, and why Blue Talks is kind of important for people.
So, thank you so much. And I'll say there's two answers to that in terms of the why Blue Talks, because there's two different audiences. Yeah. So there's two different audiences from our perspective, from everybody else's perspective, one audience. So what I mean by that, Blue Talks, first of all, is it's blue is BLU, right. So it's without the E. It stands for Business Life Universe. And how it came about was I had students that were in programs of mine that were asking for, some were saying, I'd like to have a spiritual type TEDx talk. I wish there was such a thing as a spiritual TEDx talk. Others were saying, wish you had a done for you service where I could show up and speak, but you do the rest. And ultimately, the light bulb finally went off. It took a little longer than it should have, that maybe I have an obligation to create this. Right. And so we created Blue Talks based on those needs. And what Blue Talks is now is multi-platformed. So we have multiple ways that we get the Blue Talks message out in multiple parts of the brand, which would include, in this case, live stages. Pre-COVID, but we have done one during COVID, and we'll be doing more soon. Virtual stages, we have the podcast and the book series. And the book series is an anthology or compilation series where we help numerous people write a book together to become best-selling authors. And so that's kind of what Blue Talks is, but why it started. And then I'll finish by saying that the audience is for it. But why it started was because for me, like what the big why is for me is it's what I wish I would have had when I started. So I started my journey 20 some years ago. Obviously, social media wasn't even a thing yet. And so to get media, as you probably recall, Rob, there were a lot less media sources out there. And so it was really competitive because there were still a lot of people competing to get those few spots that existed. So to get your first bite of media was really, really, really hard. And then to build it up to the point where all of a sudden now you have some credibility from this, like what it looks like on your business bio, took forever. Yeah. And I said, what if I could create that so that people that we bring into our community can both impact people with their message, but also leverage all the things that we can involve them in to actually add to their business bio. And so now we have students or people that are in our community who in the last year have spoken on stage at Harvard. They've shared the bill with Les Brown, with Jack Canfield, with JJ Virgin. And so obviously that looks pretty good in your bio. And some of these people, and also being a #1 best-selling author. And some of these people came to us and had never written in a book before, had only done one podcast interview. That's a jump of probably 5 years of credibility that I didn't have when I started. So that's what we're trying to do. And then finally, when I said there was two audiences, why I say that is because there's the audience we're serving on the front end, which is the speakers, the authors, the influencers, what have you. And then there's the audience that shows up to hear those talks and signs on to the podcast to listen to those episodes, which again are two different audiences. The audience that we're serving would be your solopreneurs, lifestyle entrepreneurs. audiences that would show up to hear the talk would be very similar to those that would show up for a Goalcast or a TEDx or a Mind Valley talk. So that's kind of in a nutshell what Blue Talks is and who we serve.
I love that. One of the things I talk to my clients about is what I call the hierarchy of desire, which is as you go up the hierarchy, become more desirable, your undoubtedly income increases, all because your authority and how you're viewed in the eyes of your ideal client is growing. So you go from a generalist to a specialist to an expert to a thought leader to a celebrity. And it's not that a celebrity in whatever space, medical celebrity, like a Dr. Oz or a JJ Virgin in fitness, et cetera. It's not that person really knows that much more. They may, but it's really that they're that much more known. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing with Blue Talks, which is fantastic. You're helping people to just compress that time frame and do what maybe they could never do themselves. Get the media, get the attention, get the authority, credibility. So I'm a big believer in that. Obviously, that's a big reason why so many people come to us for books, et cetera. I wonder, talk to me a little bit about that and the psychology of that from your perspective. Like, I'm sure it hasn't escaped you. There's a reason that you did it for yourself, and there's a reason that you're doing it for your clients. What kind of rewards do you see on the other side of that for the people that you serve?
Well, and that's a great question. And I'll give Rob, I'll go back to the book side and validate what you just said as well. From my perspective, it's just like, I always look at it like this. If I'm in a small town, and there's only 2 dentists in the town. Yeah. And one wrote a book called The Book of Dentistry. Yeah. And the other dentist didn't. Whether it's right or wrong, there's a good chance the one that wrote the book is going to be busier. Yeah. And myself, chances are I would go to that dentist. And first of all, if all things were equal, if the price was equal, then I bet that dentist is going to be overflowing and sending people to the other dentist. Yeah. If the price was equal. But chances are, going to your point, what are the benefits? That dentist that wrote the book can actually be charging more and still probably be the busier of the 2 practices. Yeah. So, that's a backup for why people go to you probably for a book and why we'd want a book. But it's also what we're doing as well, which is that we're helping people become authorities. Yeah. And so to me, when you become an authority, and I shy away from the word expert because you said a key thing, it doesn't mean that person knows more than the other person. True. In fact, that dentist we just talked about might have had less schooling, might not have gone to the higher end school, but still, because locally they put that book out and they maybe had more press, they're still going to look like the expert more. So like you said, Dr. Oz and JJ might not be the top expert in the world, but at the same time, they might be viewed as the top expert in their space. Right. And so it's a perception thing, really. But the key thing and I'll say for JJ, I don't know Dr. Oz personally, but I know AJ personally, is she can back it up. Yeah. She has the knowledge. Yeah. And that's a key thing too. It can't be phony and fake. Like, it can't be to the point where you have created this whole image, but you have nothing to back it up. Right. Can that happen? Yes. But, people will get found out and the thing will collapse. The house of cards will collapse. So, but going back to answer your question, though, my thoughts on it is that if you can get some of the base knowledge and then how to do what we just talked about, which is to leverage it, to put yourself out as an expert, to get those things that are going to get you a trust factor that makes you look more like the expert, then chances are you are going to have more business. You're going to have happier clients. You're going to have people that send people your way because they're like, oh, you got to deal with him. And you know what? I just saw him yesterday. He was on this show. Yeah. And there's even an excitement that I'm going to that person. And I'll give you an example. This is a prime example that, I can share examples from our clients, but this is a prime example that always stuck out to me. A guy named Fred Connors in the little city where I used to live. And I say little city, it was like 1 million people, but 500,000 people probably. But for the place where I'm at, that, like when you look at the larger cities like Toronto, that's a much smaller city. So this guy named Fred Connors was in the smaller city, and he happened to be on 2 shows. I forget one of them. Oh, I'd be trying to I'd probably remember it, but if I thought it through, but he was on 2 shows, and one was, I think, like the show What Not to Wear, something like that. Okay. But either way, he was the stylist. Like, they called him the self-esteem expert, but he was the hairstylist and I think makeup artist, but hairstylist for sure, for people on the show. And so he's on 2 shows. That was the only thing that separated him from every other stylist in the little city I was in. Yeah. And there, unlike the dentist scenario I said, there was lots of stylists. Like, I don't know how many stylists, but probably like at least 25 shops. And I know for a fact, because I knew him, that his haircuts for men, so I'm going to say it specifically because it's different with men's cuts. Like, men's cuts are usually 10 minutes, and you get in and out, and you might show up that day and have your haircut in 10 minutes. So his men cuts was an 18-month waiting period.
What?
And was $100 for a men's haircut.
Holy cow. Wow.
Now, the interesting part about that, his salon was super busy because of that, but he was working in the salon side by side with other stylists, and none of those other stylists were as busy as him in his own salon where he was being booked that far in advance. The only thing different about him whatsoever was he was on 2 TV shows and nobody else in the city was.
Right.
That's the power of it. And I just told you, not only were people willing to wait that long for him, not only did he have that big of a backlog, but he was charging like 5 and 6 and 7 times what the average cut cost.
Yeah.
So to me,
especially for men.
For men, exactly. And none of that for men to wait that long.
Oh my gosh. Like, are you kidding?
So what happened, right? They would go get their hair cut from somebody else 4 or 5 times while waiting for that cut from him because they wanted to say, oh, I got to sit with Fred and we had this great conversation.
Yeah.
And so to me, when you said, what's the benefit of that? And that's what we're trying to do with Blue Talk. So as I mentioned, just to go back to that example, like if you're looking at somebody and thinking, okay, who should I hire to speak at my event? And because we've helped them do this, they can send a link to a video of them speaking at Harvard University. Yeah. And obviously we know the credibility comes with that. If they can send a flyer that showed that they were featured on the same event as Les Brown and Bob Proctor and et cetera, right. They send that, let's say, and then they can say, oh, and here you can check out my contribution to this #1 best-selling book on this exact idea that you're thinking of hiring me about. Right. So then they send those 3 things that wouldn't have existed had they had to wait years to gain them, but it wouldn't have existed so soon. They send those 3 things that we've helped them get. I think you and I both know, Rob, from our experience, that person has a much better chance of getting booked than if they didn't have those 3 things. Sure. And so that's what we're giving them. We're just giving them that leg up. But again, most people that come with us are vetted because they get their referral from somebody else. Somebody will say, oh, you need to learn what Corey's doing, or, oh, your story would be a great fit for Blue Talks. And because of that, the stories have content as well. The people can back up what they're saying. And so we haven't really run into a case where somebody's faking it all the way through and then leveraging what we've done for them to get stuff. It's really, they have great stories. They have great content. We're just helping positioning them in a different way. So again, that was a long answer, but just to say that's the power to me, both being in a book and at the same time having somebody position you and place you on platforms that you wouldn't otherwise be on.
Yeah, I think some people, there's a temptation maybe to bristle at this idea of, I want to go to the best. I don't want to go to the celebrity. And truth be told, you don't know who the best is anyway at the thing. All you know is, #1, do you know who they are? And so awareness is absolutely key in all of this. And #2, are they in a situation that clearly makes them an authority in that place? Meaning, are they speaking with other authorities? Are they engaging in an environment of authorities like TV or radio or, some kind of platform like a conference, et cetera? And so, we make our judgments whether someone might listen to this and get annoyed at the idea of this is all fake or it's created celebrity. No, look, it is work. This stuff is work to do. I have a lot of clients that are financial advisors, and they always get annoyed when I talk about Susie Orman. And, because they're like, oh, Susie Orman, her advice is terrible, or Dave Ramsey, his advice is terrible, and, it's grandma's old-fashioned advice. And I'm like, look, they're where you want to be from a financial perspective because they did the work to get there. They took the steps. The best-selling books, the TV appearances, the PBS special, the long-running radio show. That's work. It takes an investment. Talk to me about what your steps are in your program. You take people through a process, certainly, maybe different process for different people depending on where they're at, but just talk through like the general steps that you would take somebody through that is good at what they do, but they're unknown and they say, okay, I'm in your hands, help me.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I'll just tag onto what you said as well there for a second too, Rob.
Yeah.
Think of somebody when you mentioned about it is work. And somebody that popped into my head right away was John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, for those that may not be familiar with John. And that wouldn't be many people, I don't think. He sold upwards of 100 million copies of that book series.
Exactly. Over 40 years, for crying out loud, that thing has been going.
100%. And when you said it takes work, I mean, not to get into all the interviews that John has done and all that stuff, but something that he, brought up to me during an interview that I wouldn't have thought this myself, but to back up how much work it really takes. What he did for 8 years when he was trying to get that book to become the phenomenon it became, for 8 years, every single day, he did intentions where he would say, which I'd never heard intentions done this way before until he said it, but he would do intentions like he would act like as if his publisher was calling him. Yeah. And he would act it out. And he's answering the phone and said, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" Whatever the name was. Say, "Jimmy, hi, how are you doing, Jimmy?" "What? The book finally made the New York Times list? Oh my God." And he acted all that out as if people are telling him it. Yeah. And he also did it as if people were walking up and saying, "John, thanks for saving our marriage," because of the advice that he was given. My point is he did that daily for 8 years before the book hit the list. That's work. Amazing. So now people could look at him and say, somebody that's, I won't use the word jealous, but somebody that's like, why him, and his vice isn't that much better than mine, and what have you. But that's, like you said, he did the work. He didn't just do a tiny little bit of work and get on it, get lucky. I mean, he did a lot of work and got lucky. Yeah. And so, like we always say, right? Being successful basically is where, luck meets preparation. Yeah. You're prepared for the opportunity when it shows up. And he was there. He walked through the doors, and he probably fell sometimes when he walked through the doors, but he put in the work. So I just wanted to back up what you said, that it does take work. In terms of the process that we take people through, it depends on what way they're coming to work with us. So for instance, if they're coming in because they want to learn how to build a speaking business, that's a totally different step-by-step process than if they're coming in saying, "I just want to land a TEDx talk and leverage that talk," versus somebody that comes into our Blue Talks community and says, "Help." Like you said, I'm starting at square one. So in the speaking program, people that come in, and it's a very big mixture, but it's people from, could be a leader working for a company who's wanting to transition into being a full-time speaker. It could be somebody who's a speaker, but they're saying, "How do I get paid though? I've been doing this for 5 years, leveraging it to grow my business, but I don't get paid. How do I get paid, Corey, to show up?" So there's various questions that'll come in. And so the program, though, for that one is a self-study program where we do provide support. So it's a 12-week program. They come in, sign up for the program, and we've already pre-recorded high-level videos, like 35, 40 minutes, because people don't want 5 hours of training anymore at a time. Right. And so every week we release another weekly training. They basically are the first quarter, I'll call it a module, is about learning the process of becoming a speaker. Second is how to position and market yourself. So we call it positioning and promotion. Third is profit. How do you actually make money doing this thing? And so we take them through that program. But then what we also do is we do monthly live Q&As. So they get that, because I want people to have both, because I've gone into programs that I didn't use because it wasn't self-study and I had to show up live and I couldn't make it. And I went through ones where it was only self-study and I didn't push myself to go into it. So I try to mix all of that. So we have live Q&As for people. We have a private Facebook group. We do Zoom calls to try to get everybody connected once a month as well. And so there's an interactive component, and then there's also self-study. So that and this TEDx program, to make it easy, I call it the Branded Talk program. Those two are pretty much the same concept. One is designed solely to help you secure, deliver, and leverage your TEDx talk. The other one is designed to help you get paid speaking engagements and how to build a speaking business. And the reason we call it the Branded Talk one, the TEDx one, is because it's more than your TEDx talk. But I reference TEDx because that's usually what people are asking me about. So those are those programs. The Blue Talks is a bit of a different can of worms because people come to us and really what they're saying is, I have a story. Some of them have shared their message lots, some haven't. I have a story, Corey, and I need you to help me get it out to the world. And so how we deliver that is twofold. Well, on one hand, it's, okay, here's when the book's due. What we need you to do is send us a up to 2,000 word chapter, a 200 word bio, and a photo. Yeah. And we basically do the rest. And with the podcast, once your book chapter's out, let's interview you about the book chapter. What we started to do now is we'll bring people on the virtual stage for an interview. and then we'll air the audio of that on the podcast just to allow us to repurpose it a little bit.
Right.
But that's what it looks like. When it's the live event, we run the live event. So we handle everything. It's like any live event you've gone to, except for it's very specific to Blue Talks. And we handle everything. You just have to show up and speak. So the point of that is we pretty much handle everything. You just have to show up, and then you learn the whole process. So then if you want to write your own book, you've now learned the process from us of what being a part of a book looks like. And I see a lot of people, and I did that myself, that'll start with a compilation book because they keep saying they're going to write their own book and never do.
Right.
Then they get in a compilation book and say, wow, that wasn't as hard as I thought. And then they finally start writing their own book. So that's probably why I love that. And also I get calls from people and emails saying, I did a happy dance. I'm finally in a book that was a bestseller.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it looks like. The one thing I'll add though, is it comes with, and a lot of people think we're foolish because we used to sell this, but it comes with a masterclass, a 5-week masterclass that everybody gets that joins it. But our hidden reason for that is because the masterclass is called the Entrepreneurship Speakerpreneurship Masterclass. We're trying to teach you about the book business so that you actually maximize being a part of Blue Talks more. And it's a win-win that way. What we teach you, you can use for your own book, but also we're hoping you use that with Blue Talks, and that'll allow you to figure out how to market a little bit better, how to use a popular hashtag or create a hashtag and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we also do leverage training. So I'll do, once the book is out or close to being out, we'll do a training saying, here's all the different ways you can leverage this now. Because I find, and I don't know if you've seen this, Rob, a lot of people will be in a book and not know what to do with that. Like they'll be in a book and it's not even on their email signature. Yeah. One of the best property places ever. They're not, they don't actually tell people that they talk to that they wrote a book. They don't say it on podcasts. They don't, and on and on. And so we actually take people through, here's many of the ways you can now leverage being a part of this book. And so we do that kind of training. And then finally, we do group coaching to help people get ready for the live event. Because again, speaking is its own beast as well.
Sure.
And we do get a lot of people, which is also very rewarding. We get a lot of people that come to us that have only been on stage once. And the second stage they're going to be on is equivalent to a TEDx stage. Yeah. Like, we have an event coming up in June of next year at Columbia University in New York. So imagine if you've never spoken in your life and your first talk is at Columbia University.
Yeah, sounds terrifying.
Yeah, well, and that's what we're doing for people. But people say to me, well, aren't you scared taking somebody on that hasn't spoke before and putting them on that kind of stage? And first of all, we're recording it. It's not live. We're recording it. There is an audience there. Sorry, I'll correct that. It's live for the audience. But the video that's going to go out to the world is not live. So we do kind of have a do-over, even though the audience would have to see it. But secondly, we're coaching them all the way up through. And what I'm looking at is the stuff they're learning after me doing this for 20-some years is the stuff it took me 10 years to learn. Right. So if they can learn that stuff, as long as they're comfortable being on a stage, that's the key thing. Yeah. But if they can learn all that stuff I'm teaching them, they're going to be ahead of where I was when I started.
Sure.
And so, yeah. So that again, because it's three things, that was a long answer because three separate programs and I want to give you the full answer. But that's the approach we take for each of them.
Gotcha. Well, you've talked a lot about books. So why don't we change gears and talk to me about you've written a couple of books. You have the book of speaking. Obviously, you've done compilation books. You have a Wall Street Journal book that you're a co-author in. Tell me, for you personally, how have you seen your books help you to make the kind of, make more money, make the kind of impact you want to make, et cetera? Like, how has it helped you specifically to grow your influence in your space?
You've probably heard some form of this phrase that the book is probably the best business card you'll ever have in terms of cost versus return. Sure. And so Robert Kiyosaki, I heard him one time say, he said, I'm a best-selling author, but I'm not a best-selling writer. He said, if you see my first draft, you wouldn't come back. And he said, but he sold 26 million books. So to me, he's an author as well. Yeah. But his argument is it's the best business card he's ever had because it's opened more doors than anything else he's ever done. Right. And so I would say I have different, as you said, different types of books. So first of all, before I go anywhere, I'll say it's important to know what your goal is with your book. So I have different goals for different books. And so to say how I've used them, which I will tell you, results wise, how I've used them and seen direct return. But I've also went into books with different goals. So for example, I've put out books where the whole goal was to build my email list. And I leveraged 2 books I put out only digital. I hadn't released them as print yet, we added about 5,000 people to my email list in about 3 months.
Nice.
And that was something I couldn't do any other way. I tried other ways at the time, couldn't do it. So that's one thing. I had another book, and this ties to what you're talking about, called the Standing Ovations from Every Customer. And so this was really related to me doing talks around customer service. I've never sold that book ever. You've never been able to buy the book. The whole purpose of the book, it's a pocket book. It's like over in the wall over there in front of me. It's a pocket book. And what we did is we found the top list of CEOs and top lists of companies, and we sent it directly to the CEO, basically with the idea of, hey, if you can take this book and learn what you can from it and share it with your staff, great. But we know a small percentage is going to say, no, I need to bring Corey in to share this.
Yeah.
And so I can track back. I don't know the number anymore because it's a while ago since we did it, but I could track back and say it's been double digits for sure. I want to say upwards of 100, but let's just say somewhere between 50 and 100 paid bookings.
Wow.
From simply sending that book in the mail for free. And it was a pocketbook. It was designed, tiny book, so it doesn't cost as much. But that book, again, the goal was solely, let's get some paid bookings out of this.
Love it.
The other one I mentioned was build an email list. We've had another one. So I wrote a book called The Book of Why and How. And that book is right now currently with Morgan James Publishing, so a New York publisher. And that book, totally different approach than any of the other books. It was more meant to be like The Alchemist or The Four Agreements or Celestine Prophecy, where I didn't mean to build a back-end business and never intended to. It was more a book that I felt could impact and change lives, period, and nothing beyond that. And so that book, ironically, is kind of the biggest buzz. Like James Redfield, who wrote Celestine, wrote the foreword for the book. John Gray, who I mentioned, J.J. Virgin, who I mentioned, T.R. Becker, they wrote endorsements for the book.
Nice.
The book, like I say, is with Morgan James Publishing. It's Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and New York Times, that book. So, but it's been on Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, like all the other lists.
Yeah.
And so that book was designed to be my version of a book that can sort of impact people anywhere they get it. Like almost anybody could benefit from it. And I've had the most amount of comments of people that I didn't know read the book with that book saying, I read this book and it helped me find my purpose. And so it's changed my whole life. Nice. Like I get a lot of feedback from that book. So that book, I know going in is probably not going to help build my back-end business, but I'm okay with that. Yeah. Now, what I do, and this is a tip for people in case this hasn't been shared on the show, I do this with every book now, but I started with that book where on the second or third page, it says, thank you so much for grabbing the Book of Why. As a thank you, I want to give you the free audiobook. And so obviously you can probably tell what the reason of that is. It's to add to my email list.
Sure.
And obviously give value, but add to my email list at the end of the day. And I have to tell you, because that book's with a publisher where I don't see who's buying it, I'm shocked at the fact that randomly, weekly, and the only way they can find that sign up is through that book.
Yeah.
Or me saying it on a podcast.
Yeah.
And so I'm amazed sometimes how I'll have 15, 20 signups from a book that was originally released almost 5 years ago.
Wow. Still
now weekly having those signups. But that book, again, was designed a very specific way. The book of public speaking you mentioned was designed to build my back-end business.
Yeah.
So for people that are thinking, should I sign up for Corey's program? Well, now you get a chance to read the book. Maybe Corey's program's not open right now. So we only open certain times a year. Well, you read the book and you go, I'm going to be ready as soon as it opens. Yeah. I also have a podcast called Get Paid to Speak. And it's the exact same idea behind as that book, is that it's designed to build the back-end business with. So again, Rob, I answered your question with a whole bunch of different scenarios.
Yeah, well, you different books for different purposes. Great.
Yeah, I find that's the biggest challenge. I get questions. I mean, I feel like I should be also doing some author training or something, because I get questions probably daily, but at least weekly around the book business. And the questions over and over again, I can give them their answer with one sentence as long as I know, what is your goal? Yeah. But what I find is most people want to say, what's your goal with the book? And I give them examples. They're like, I never thought of that. So until you know what the goal is, how can I tell you the best approach to take with your book? Like the biggest question you probably get, and I get is, I know I get for sure, is should I self-publish or go with a publisher? Well, again, my question right away to you is, what's your goal?
Sure.
Well, my goal is I need to get it to everybody in the world. Then you got to be with a publisher. And I shouldn't say you have to, but that's the route you probably should go. If that's the only goal, is I just want this book to be in everybody's hands. And it's not to say it's going to happen with a publisher, but it's your best chance, because they can get you in Walmart in a day, and it'll take you 10 years with a self-published book if you can get there. So, but now, so when I say that, I don't want people to think I'm promoting traditional over self, because that's not the only, but that's the biggest reason I would say with a publisher. But then if you answer the question, I want to make more money on my book. I want to retain control. I want to be able to not change the edits just because they want me to. I want the book out soon. I don't want to wait 2 years, and on and on and on. Then I'm going to say go self-published.
Yeah.
But until they know.
Also, don't forget, most people want traditional publishing because they think they're going to get a big check for it. And the likelihood of that is next to zero, right? To be
100%.
to be quite honest. So that's what I see. I see tons of people coming to me like, hey, I got this idea. It's a great idea. And I'm like, look, you could have the cure for cancer, but if you don't have a big platform, traditional publisher's not interested. Unfortunately, I'm sure you see that too.
Yeah, and I'll give you a story. I mean, a super quick story to back that up is a buddy of mine wrote a book, and I don't mind sharing the story because he shared it publicly on our show, but his name's Dave Carroll. He wrote the song United Breaks Guitars about United Airlines breaking his guitar. Video, if you go look on YouTube, 20-some million views. Wow. Story's been heard by over 100 million people. And Dave wrote a song after that about Wayne Dyer, wrote a song about one of his books. And Wayne wasn't as interested in that at the time. He since, I think the book, if I remember correctly, Dave said the song ultimately ended up on Wayne's documentary that they put together for him. But at first, his bigger thing was like, what? He's the guy who wrote Unite Breaks Guitars? Oh my God, I love that. And I love that song. And he said, oh my God, I need to connect him with Louise Hay. And this is before Wayne's passing. So he reached out to Louise Hay, said, we need to sign this guy, get his story out to the world. Yeah. So when Dave signed that deal because of Wayne, and then Dave went to a Hay House conference. And this is why I brought up the whole story. He went to a Hay House conference, said, Corey, one of the first things they said was, our main concern here today, more than the amazingness of your book, and they listed all these things, is how big your platform is.
Yep.
Because they said, if they have their own hybrid publisher, Balboa Press. If you want to go Balboa Press, we're happy to go through the whole process with you. If you want to come to Hay House, you need to have a platform. Yeah. And what they were trying to tell these people that either A, were authors or people who paid to go to an author training was, if you don't have a platform, a publisher's not going to look at you. So just again, a story to back up what you said. Traditional publishers this day and age, the first thing they want to know is what's your platform. And a good buddy of mine, John Lee Dumas, with the popular Entrepreneurs on Fire show, signed and he shared with us the deal. I forget what it was, 300 and some thousand was his advance. He said, Corey, this is very abnormal. And to get to that point, he had to build up a show with 1 million unique listeners a month and a very, 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 I'm going to call it very red hot email list and separate communities around podcasting. And he's speaking on podcasting conferences and various conferences 100 times a year. Yeah. Well, he got that advance because of all of that. And he would have got it with
Think about how massive that platform is. That's a tiny advance for how massive that platform is. So
absolutely. And it's rare to even get that much anymore. So to your point, I signed with a New York publisher and my advance was basically almost negligible. Yeah. They gave an advance because they want to be a traditional publisher. They want to make sure they maintain that. But I didn't have to sell many books to recover that advance.
Right. Love it. Corey, great stuff. Thank you for sharing. Where can people learn a little bit more about you? Where can they find more about your program? Let's give them some links. We've given them a lot of great content, I think, today.
Well, I'll give people two directions. I normally like to only give one because I know if you give, what is that thing? If you chase two rabbits, you never catch one.
I say
so. I know. Yeah, and I know that if you give people too many things, they go, that's too overwhelming. But I only say this because I want to give people a free gift. And if you go this route, that's all you have to do. So the free gift is, and I shared it earlier, I teased it, so I figured I might as well give it away, which is the Book of Public Speaking, the audio version. So the audio book, and it's pretty easy. It's at thebookofwhyaudio.com. Awesome. So the Book of Why audio.com. And I said, I realized I just said it wrong. So it's the Book of Why and How. So you're getting the audio version of that book. But again, the Book of Why audio.com. So that's one place I would send people. But if either A, you're not an audiobook person, or B, you just want to reach out directly, I don't usually do this, but I'll just give my email address. Yeah. So my email address is pretty easy as well. It's thatspeakerguy@gmail.com.
Awesome.
So thatspeakerguy@gmail.com. Reach out there if you want to connect me directly, or grab yourself a free copy of the audiobook. And if you do that, then you're going to be in our network anyway, and we'll make sure you get all the contact info.
Love it. Corey, a lot of great content, man. Thanks so much for sharing. Great to have you on the show, my friend.
Thanks, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Love it.